For more than 50 years, stories of the Bermuda Triangle have made many people wary of traveling through it. Among them, the famous story of Flight 19. Observers started to take notice of the Triangle's oddities shortly after the disappearance of 5 Navy bombers. December the 5th, 1945, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 TBM Avengers with 14 Navy airmen on board were preparing for a routine training mission from the Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station. The plan was to fly east to Bimini in the Bahamas and practice dive bombing a wreck called the Sapona.
They made a couple runs over the ship. Then they turned and headed north almost to Grand Bahama Island.
The crew was following its flight plan, according to writer Richard Weiner. He has studied what he calls the Devil's Triangle and has written about it for more than 30 years. His latest book is on ghost planes, and he's devoting a chapter to the mystery of Flight 19.
Shortly thereafter, they radioed in that they were having problems. They couldn't see direction.
It was about 4 p.m. when flight leader Lieutenant Charles Taylor was overheard talking to another pilot on the mission.
He was sure that he was lost. He doesn't know where he is. He's sure his compasses are not working. In fact, they should have been near a landmark on the flight, and that's when he realized he was lost, because they could not find any landmark.
For some reason, Taylor thought he was in the Florida Keys.
Thinking himself in the Florida Keys, he went northeast, which is what you would do to get to Miami and Fort Lauderdale.
At about the same time, the weather changed.
A front came through, and the wind that was prevailing from the southeast made an about 180-degree come around and started blowing out of the north.
It's very possible that they did not compensate for the wind shift.
Retired Navy pilot Captain David White also trained pilots at the Fort Lauderdale Air Station at the time. He recalls Flight 19 most likely encountered rain squalls, and that, says Weiner, could have further confused flight leader Taylor.
He says, it looks like white water. We can't see anything. So I've talked to some oceanographers on that, and they referred to white water as being a white squall, a sudden squall that's so much rain in there, you're flying right into a wall of water.
The control tower tried to guide them back to the Florida coast, but flight leader Taylor couldn't get his bearings, making it impossible for the tower to guide them in. Weiner speculates that Taylor was really over Andros Island in the northern Bahamas.
He really believed they were over the Keys. Well, you fly over Andros Island, on parts of it, it's narrow, flat, it looks like the Florida Keys. Well, he turned north, thinking they'd come up the Gulf Coast and then come into Fort Lauderdale from the west. Well, when they turned north, and they were actually left Andros Islands, they just had water, water, water.
At one point, Flight 19 turned to the west in a desperate search for land.
They figured that he almost got to land, but by then the weather conditions had deteriorated, and visibility was decreased, and the storm had gone through. They probably went through some rain showers, and they figured that they got almost back to the Florida coastline by going west a couple times. Then they turned around and headed east again, and that's when they got in trouble.
But they never found the Florida coast, and again turned to the north, presumably out to sea and out of radio contact. The next morning, Captain White was among those leading the search for the missing planes.
We made a scouting line where you fly airplanes abreast, side by side, watching all the visibility, and we went between 500 and 1,000 feet in altitude so that we wouldn't miss anything.
One of the planes involved in the search, a PBM Mariner, also vanished, further adding to the mystery.
Everybody assumes that the rescue plane blew up. It was on radar, and it fell off radar from one of the aircraft carriers out in the search. And a freighter did notice a big explosion in the sky, and so that is assumed to be the Mariner. They were known as flying gas tanks.
The 5 planes in Flight 19, with 14 Navy flyers, were nowhere to be found.
And we searched, and we didn't find a trace, not any debris or anything.
What really happened to Flight 19? We may never know, but one pilot thinks he may have an answer. Bruce Gernon believes Flight 19 may have encountered some strange electrical charge while flying through the storm. Gernon speaks from experience. He had his own scary bout with the Bermuda Triangle. He and his father were returning from the northern Bahamas. It was a sunny winter day.
Well, I was flying back from Andros Island and planned to go direct to Bimini and then Palm Beach International.
He noticed a few puffy clouds, nothing out of the ordinary, until
I started climbing up, and while we were climbing, we noticed this lenticular cloud. It was a cigar-shaped cloud with smooth edges. And it was directly in my flight path, and so it looked harmless, so I climbed right up and over it.
But something unusual happened when Gernon finally got to the top of the cloud.
It started spreading out and up, and I was climbing at 1,000 feet per minute, and it was climbing at the same rate that I am. And I wasn't able to escape it until I got to 11,500 feet. Finally, I broke free of this cloud.
Or so he thought. But moments later, he found his path blocked by this massive storm cloud.
I noticed that it was emanating right out of the earth. Instead of having a base to it, it had no base. It came right out of the water.
Bruce Gernon encountered a strange cloud on his flight home to South Florida. He tried to remain calm, but he had no choice. He had to fly right through it.
And when I penetrated into it, there was some kind of intense electricity going on, like lightning, except it was not lightning bolts. It was lightning flashes. And so I had to turn off to the south.
He searched for a way out of the storm. This routine trip home was certainly taking an ominous turn. A strange storm cloud had enveloped his plane somewhere over the Bahamas.
Above each squall line was a large anvil head.
The 2 anvil-shaped clouds came together and formed a tunnel.
So I penetrated into this tunnel because I felt it was my only exit. From what I could see, it was clear blue sky toward Miami, so I aimed the airplane for the blue hole on the other end of the tunnel.
Once the aircraft entered the tunnel, a strange phenomenon took place.
These lines appeared to be swirling within the tunnel.
Bizarre flying conditions that would have doomed even the most experienced pilot. Amazingly, Bruce didn't get flustered.
I just continued to fly visually through the other side of the tunnel. When I reached that end, the wingtips scraped the edges of the tunnel, And then when I made it out the tunnel, I looked back and these contrails had formed on the wingtips.
Bruce then found himself flying in a haze that seemed to follow him. He called it electronic fog because his instruments went haywire.
It's like the compass started spinning and the directional gyro was not accurate. It was indicating that I was making a turn, but I was not making a turn.
Bruce used a sort of internal compass to guide his plane. Then, as he flew over land, the fog dissipated. When he finally emerged from the haze, he was over Miami, nearly 100 miles off course. What happened to Bruce Gernon? 30 years later, he's still not sure. Meteorologists speculate that Bruce's plane may have been in a thunderstorm as it was forming.
The thunderstorm is essentially an updraft and a downdraft type of situation. Air rapidly rising, air rapidly sinking, so that creates a lot of turbulence within the environment of the thunderstorm, and it can happen in a matter of a minute or two. The air can rise up and look like it's just, you know, surrounding you or whatever place you're in.
And as Gernon left the storm, Lusheen thinks his plane may have carried an electrical charge, identified by Gernon as an electronic fog.
The electrical properties, of course, of thunderstorms are you get a lot of difference in charges in the tops of thunderstorms, and that, if it perhaps electrified the plane for a short time, that might continue on as he flew out into the clear air, even though there wasn't anything going on at the time. It's like rubbing something to create static electricity. Once you get it on you like that, it takes a while for the static electricity to disappear, and so once you get that charge on you, you could continue along with that same charge for a period of time.
Whatever it was, Gernon believes that the same thing may have contributed to the crash that killed John Kennedy Jr., his wife and her sister. He thinks electrically charged air could have enveloped his aeroplane too.
What could have happened to JFK if he had encountered this electric fog would be a situation where he would lose all visual references.
The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board concluded that the crash of JFK Jr.'s aeroplane was caused by a disorientated young pilot who lost control in the dark, as recalled by New York's former FBI chief James Kallstrom.
I think the overall opinion there by many, many experts is that he got himself in a position and just could not fly the airplane in the weather conditions he found himself in. A real tragedy.
Gernon speculates the directional gyro in JFK Jr.'s plane may have been giving him false readings. The instrument is crucial in determining the heading of an aeroplane.
He's going to follow that because he wants to fly straight, and he's going to be turning and not even realizing it. And that would probably cause the death spiral that he ended up doing.
The crash is among those off the northeast coast of America, which leads some people to wonder if the Bermuda Triangle is expanding past its original borders.
Many people think that the Bermuda Triangle actually is a number of triangles that fan out from Bermuda and cover a large section of the eastern coast of the United States and Caribbean. John Spencer was actually the first author to write an entire book devoted to the Bermuda Triangle, and he called it the Limbo of the Lost, and did believe that it followed the continental shelf of the United States, went into the Gulf of Mexico, around through the Caribbean, and did a circumference around Bermuda of about 450 miles.
Some actually wonder if one of these triangles exists off the coast of New York City.
Any sudden disappearance or sudden crash in the area is becoming more suspect. People even think if we are causing the triangle ourselves with our pollution, with electromagnetic disturbance from our own frequencies, that it would eventually fan out.
As one writer called it, the curse of Long Island. Remarkably, this tract of the northeast coast has accounted for the horrific deaths of hundreds of air passengers. Curious tragedies like the Egypt Air Flight 990 remain a mystery. But of the tragedies in this expanding triangle, the crash of TWA 800 comes with plausible explanations. Plummeting to Earth, what went wrong?
this huge fireball was seen for 40 miles, and there was no mayday from the crew. The FBI, under the jurisdiction of federal statutes, was there to conduct a potential criminal investigation and see if, in fact, that was an act of terrorism.
James Kallstrom was the special agent in charge of the FBI's New York office when Flight 800 went down.
Our feeling was at the beginning it was a good chance it was terrorism, and we had to basically end up saying it wasn't because there was no proof. There was no evidence. There was none of the scarring, none of the metallurgy, none of the chemical evidence that would have been there if it was an act of terrorism. It was this massive explosion in the center fuel tank that was caused by electrical sparking. Although there is still a small number of people that believe it was a conspiracy, there's a small number of people that believe that I'm part of a cover-up. There's a small amount of people that think that the Navy shot the plane down, which is preposterous. I think generally the public accepts the outcome of TWA Flight 800.
The meteorological conditions in the Bermuda Triangle perhaps hold the key to stripping plausible explanations away from the fear that grips this region. According to the US Coast Guard, the majority of disappearances can be attributed to the area's unique environmental features.
Still get squalls that can come up pretty quickly out of the blue. You can still get water spouts. So there are still dangers out there.
At the National Weather Service office in Miami, forecasters are responsible for noticing meteorological abnormalities, and the Bermuda Triangle has plenty.
So you get a variety of weather. You can't really tell necessarily which direction the weather is going to come from. When you're in one area of the country, normally the weather comes from the west. In the other area of the country, the weather comes from the east. In this particular area, the weather actually converges from different directions. So it provides an enormous opportunity for different kinds of weather to occur at rather quick, very spontaneous and without relatively much warning either. It's a very warm area of water which is moving at a fairly high speed, and the energy released from the Gulf Stream gets in the atmosphere and creates a lot of turbulence, a lot of thunderstorms that occur only right there in the narrow area of the Gulf Stream.
Because of the convergence of weather systems, Lusheen says the area is rife for a particularly dangerous type of thunderstorm called the microburst.
What it is a thunderstorm which creates a tremendous outrush of wind when it hits the ground. And when it's of sufficient velocity, it creates a very dangerous situation which can sweep onto the water and actually cause tremendous winds and waves. 100-mile-an-hour winds are not out of the question, and you get what the mariners often call white squalls, which are just where the air gets filled with all the spray and stuff from the downrush of the air. And of course, boats can sink. So things can change very rapidly, and rapidly changing weather can catch people unprepared, and that's what makes it dangerous.
But despite the increased risk of bad weather, one of the world's leading maritime insurance companies, Informa Marine, says the Bermuda Triangle region is not significant when it comes to shipping losses. In fact, the company says it's probably one of the quieter areas for merchant vessel incidents. And in the past 30 years, there's been a technology revolution in shipping.
Newer satellite pictures are up there, geostationary satellites which can see down from 22,000 miles above the Earth, give high-resolution definition to the clouds and so on. We have different ways of looking at the atmosphere through the satellites.
Most ships now come equipped with global positioning and radar, so boat captains have a better idea of what they might encounter at sea.
I've come to the conclusion it's multifactorial, that some planes and boats can disappear for different reasons. There are unusual fogs and vapors that are reported out there. Those are documented fact. There are unusual electromagnetic anomalies and phenomena that simply are not explained.
author Richard Weiner believes nearly all the mystery is explicable.
Whatever is going to happen in the future, I would say it's going to be just human error, mechanical failure, structural malfunction, or weather and atmospheric phenomena, nothing else.
Believers will always point to certain events to support the mystery surrounding this stretch of ocean. But as science and technology evolve, more of these mysteries will be uncovered, unmasking the danger that lurks inside the Bermuda Triangle.